The first time I came to Amsterdam 3 years ago, my Belgian friend Robert said that I had to try this dish. He knows my taste and he knew that I would like it, and indeed, I took a bite and I went into food rapture. It is one of the most wonderful things I've ever tasted. But I should warn you, it is Filet American, which is in fact raw beef with a kind of mayonnaise dressing. But it is really, really delicious. And you should get over your food prejudice and give it a try. So let's go prepare Filet American.
That's really good.
Show you how to prepare the meat once we're back in our apartment in Burbank. But for right now, I'm going to show the preparation of the dish with prepared meat. So once you've got your meat ready, come back to me.
So instead of steak tartare that we were able to get in Amsterdam, in the United States we are going to make our own by grinding our own meat. The type of meat that you want doesn't have to be expensive because it's going to be chopped into small pieces. The recipe that I found suggested to buy a top sirloin steak. This is a moderately tender piece of beef, good beefy flavour, and not too much fat. Because we're eating this cold, we don't want to have that cold fat texture in the mouth. And the other thing this recipe suggested, because we're talking about raw meat that we're going to consume raw, is to cover the outside of it with Worcestershire sauce, which is mostly vinegar, and that should kill off anything that might be sort of lurking on the outside. And I, of course, bought this from a very, very reputable butcher, so I know that this is going to be good quality meat. So I'm putting the meat into a non-reactive bowl and adding 2 tablespoons of Worcestershire sauce. And I'm going to rub it all over the outside. And then we'll give it a few minutes in the fridge before we trim off the fat and cut it up into cubes. Now that it's had a bit of a rest, I'm going to trim off as much fat as possible from the outside because we don't want to eat that. And then I'm going to cut it into small pieces. They don't have to be too small because of course it's going to the food processor. Tell you what, it's a lot harder to see the fat once it's been covered with Worcester sauce.
Yeah.
Your patience will be rewarded. Having got most of the fat off, I'm just cutting it into smaller pieces and putting it back in the bowl. And then what I'm going to do, which is not mentioned in the recipe, but it's a tip that I learned somewhere along the line, is that you put it in the freezer for not too long, only a few minutes. The idea is that it's going to chill down a lot, not enough to actually freeze the meat, but to chill down. Before you grind it, you want your meat really cold, because the last thing you want to do is be slightly cooking your meat with the grinding of the food processor. So now it's going to get a few minutes in the freezer to chill down. My beef has chilled down a bit, so it's ready to grind. I've got my food processor here with the S blade attachment. So in go the chunks of meat. The recipe that I've got says to throw everything else in there, but I think that's going to be too untextured. But I am going to be, since I hate cutting up onions, throw in the shallot. I decided to use a shallot instead of red onion because this is going to be raw and I think it's going to be a much milder flavour. Now we're just going to pulse very slowly. Ow, that hurt. Now we're just going to pulse very slowly. We don't want to turn it into paste, but at the same time, we don't want it to be too chunky. If I remember from Amsterdam, the texture was sort of like ground beef, and I think that needs to go quite a bit further. It takes a while, but that's why we chilled the beef down so that we could get away with that. I think a little bit further. Okay, that is starting to look good. Do you think a bit further?
Maybe just a little bit.
Maybe just a little bit further, yeah. So I think that's about the texture that we're looking for. It looks gross because the Worcestershire sauce has made it quite unappetizing brown, but once we add in the mayonnaise and some mustard, that'll lighten it up into a happy looking pink color, and we'll have something quite similar to what we had in Amsterdam.
It's ironic that we are in the best kitchen of our trip and we're doing the least amount of cooking. In fact, Filet American is really just a preparation. You've just got the ground beef, and we've bought some from the supermarket, and we're going to add to that some shallots, some pickles, little tiny cornichons, and mayonnaise, mustard, Worcestershire sauce to taste. Because we're going to be eating the onion raw, we want this very finely chopped. The advantage of using a shallot or putting a sweet red onion into a dish like this is they're not quite as sulphurous on the back of the throat. They fit better in their raw state than they would if we're going for a more traditional onion. And I'm slowly learning to use my fingers to guide the knife like I'm supposed to. I'm still about the same amount of onion as you will of the chopped cornichon.
So what are these little guys called?
Cornichons, which is a fancy name for a little tiny pickle.
It's a small pickled cucumber,
yes.
Some sort of a pickled cucumber, or a gherkin, as they're called in other countries, would be just fine. And they need to be, speaking of fine, chopped up pretty fine because they're going in with a chopped beef product. In France, steak tartare traditionally comes with a bunch of mix-ins that you add to it. And it's always onion and a crunchy pickled vegetable. All of these things are there to give it a bit of crunch so that you're not just eating plain old raw meat, and quite a bit of flavour so it's not just the raw beef taste that you're getting.
And finally, just chop through with a rolling motion on the knife to get any big pieces cut up just that little bit smaller. We want crunch, but we don't want big lumps. Always pushing down towards the blade so that you don't run any risk of cutting yourself. Into the dish using the back of the blade so that we don't damage the board or the expensive knife or whatever knife you've got. And now we're ready to assemble. I'm going to add the rest of the ingredients together, mix them up, and then add them to the meat because I want the meat exposed out of the fridge for the least amount of time possible. It's a fairly simple recipe. We're going to go with 2, 2, and 2. 2 tablespoons of mayo, 2 teaspoons each of mustard and Worcester sauce. So I don't really have a tablespoon, so I'm just going to be generous on a regular spoon.
That looks pretty good.
Whatever mustard you've got is going to be fine. It will change the flavour of the Filet American accordingly, but you'll know that because you put that mustard in. Don't go overboard with the Worcester sauce. A little too much of it starts to make the colour go a little odd, and add it to taste. We tend to like a reasonable amount, but we'll see if that's good. We can always add more later. And that looks pretty good. Let me give it a taste. I could do a little bit more Worcester in that, particularly since it's going to be mellowed down by the meat. The mustard is giving it a yellow colour that we didn't get at the Van Dobben, so we must be doing something slightly different there. And there we are. I think that's ready. And now it's time for the meat, which is in the fridge. You probably don't read Dutch because I don't, but this is meat that is made specifically sold as steak tartare, ready for this purpose. As I said earlier, do not use regular ground beef. It is not safe for this job. Ground beef is designed to be cooked, and it needs to be cooked. Tartare is designed to be eaten uncooked, and that's what this is. You see it's a very lean meat. It has very little fat because we don't want uncooked fat in our mouth. The beef fat does not taste good without it being warm and cooked. And now, mix the two together.
I'm glad I chose a fork and not a spoon.
Yes. Fork is much better. Why am I doing a bad job?
No, it's good.
Right out of the fridge, the meat is a bit harder to work with, but it's safer to work with. You don't need to see every minute of me mixing. I'll be back when it's finished. Ultimately, you probably can get quite firm and assertive with it to get it to mix thoroughly. But that's the texture and the colour that you're looking for.
It's pink.
It's pink and delicious.
It's been mixed enough so that everything is homogenized. There's no little bits of red meat that haven't been mixed in. It's kind of uniformly pink and creepy looking.
It's time to do my favourite part of this whole show. Eat the food.
I'm scared.
What did you choose for the bread?
This is just a simple bread roll that I got from the local supermarket. It's a crusty white bread roll. At Van Dobben, where we had lunch, they had the choice between either a soft or what they call a hard roll, and by hard they really mean crunchy. I have had the Van Dobben soft roll before, and I don't like it as much because I really like a crust.
That was the mistake I made the first time.
Was it?
It is so much better with the crust.
So this one, the look of it in the supermarket reminded me of what they had at Van Dobben. It's a sort of a submarine-shaped roll, small.
But you want something with a little good hard crust. A baguette would probably be good if you can't find rolls like this. Yep. Chop it into shorter lengths.
Oh wow.
That really tastes like the Van Dobben.
It does. I can see pieces. I think that Van Dobben might have processed it with an electric thing to get everything far more homogeneous. I can see pieces here, but flavour-wise, it's all sort of come together.
Yeah,
and it's
I like the extra fact that we get the little crunch from the cornichons and from the onion. I think that adds something to it that wasn't present in the sort of more homogeneous.
Better than Van Dobben? Uh-oh.
Well, my opinion is an opinion. Everyone has one. So there you have it. Restaurant food, fresh local ingredients, simple techniques, and really, really great food.
Eat some raw meat.
Yeah.